Hello, and welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined as always by Eleanor Goldfield.
Morning.
That was not said with the normal enthusiasm. You're really
I'm doing my best
having a
here.
tough morning.
I am doing my best. I am
And
just
dealing with allergies as well.
I'm dealing with allergies, so everyone thinks I have the plague, but I'm really just sniffling and coughing because there's pollen lodged right there at the back of your throat, like right where that tickle happens, and then it's the most irritating thing in the world, besides stubbing your toe. And
I always thought that was a bit of cheesecake I had a couple nights ago.
and I'm only a few sips into my espresso, so I might say some loopy shit.
People like you, Loopy. There's a lot of fans of you, Loopy.
Good. Well, welcome.
I'm allergic to allergies, but I don't know how to show it. That's my new joke.
No, that's a play off of Hedberg's joke.
It's a rearrangement of Hedberg's.
I'm against picketing, but I don't know how to show it.
Yeah. That's his joke, although your impersonation was pretty awful.
Oh, come on.
All right. Let's get into this fucking hellstorm. Since I haven't said
Hail
it,
or hell?
I said hellstorm. Since I haven't said in a while, this is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
Sometimes hellstorms. Hellstorms.
I mean, we can talk about hellstorms if you'd like.
No, I like hellstorm. I think that sounds cool. It's very like Dante's Inferno.
Speaking of Dante's Inferno and death, the coronavirus prediction model, now that so many states are opening up early before it's really recommended, the U.S. model, the one that's respected apparently, has been increased to 134,000 predicted deaths, which would be over double the number of Americans killed in Vietnam. And look, here's the thing, and we've talked before about how America is like too big to really govern as a single government. Like, really, we should separate into our states, go our different ways, and don't kill each other. But probably
or anyone else.
But since this is we're stuck with this federal government overseeing 300 and whatever million people, different areas of the country should open up differently. New York is going to be in a couple of weeks way past their curve of their peak, and it would make sense for them to open up in a couple of weeks or whenever they're whenever they're now saying is right. However, Georgia is just facilitating their upcoming peak because they're not there yet, and they're just like, yeah, go to the barber and fucking sneeze on people. It'll be fun.
Can I share? I saw this on Instagram this morning. It was a guy that had posted. It said, Ireland is closing all pubs until August 10th. Ireland, all pubs. But yeah, let's go ahead and open up the Cracker Barrel. And that to me just that says everything. Although I will say, I did hear that some places in Dublin at least are doing Guinness delivery. So all is not lost, but still it throws into sharp focus what people are living without in places where they've never lived without it. Meanwhile, we've got to open up a massage parlor outside of Atlanta. Like, fuck you.
I know. Well, listen, people got to get their eyebrows threaded, and they got to get it now. Now, folks. All right? Yeah, look, different parts of the country should be at different peaks and different places in this pandemic fight, but to act like you just open up because you want to, because you're fucking tired of it. And Donald, I don't understand why anyone listens to any words that come out of Donald Trump's stupid face. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like they know he's lying. They know, like they saw him say, oh, we're going to open by Easter, which was weeks ago. They saw him say, oh, 10 people are going to die. That's it. They saw him say it's nothing. So they've seen all this. And then they continue, even our news media continues to cover his speaking like it matters. It's ridiculous and repulsive. And he did this stupid Fox News town hall in the Lincoln Memorial the other day, and I'm proud to say I did not watch it, but I've read some quotes.
I don't even
And
understand.
it's like, why is he in the Lincoln Memorial? He should really, what he is he's like an animal mascot that our country has. He's like a big dumb orangutan that we walk out there and we say, look at it, they're crazy. What's he doing? Oh, so crazy. But you shouldn't listen to shit he says. You shouldn't. He's just a mascot. He's a big hippo that we waddle around and we're like, look at this thing.
Oh, that's not fair to hippos. Well, also in the realm of totally pointless and bizarre, Lee and I just happened to be walking outside at this particular moment the other day when the fucking flyovers were happening. And if folks aren't...
For those of you who don't know.
I'm getting there. Jeez.
Boy, you are.
Just a few sips into the espresso,
you are
friend.
in a mood today.
Take it easy. Okay. So in at least 22 cities across the country, the Navy decided that they wanted to do a military flyover as a thank you to frontline medical workers.
Because, that pays the bills.
Because, well, and I tweeted about this. I said, I'm sure that all the medical professionals were deeply moved by the fighter jets flying over crowds of people in otherwise locked-down cities. Because what says thanks better than coaxing people out en masse to watch a masturbatory display by the number one cause of death and destruction in the world?
And can I just say that CNN had a report, because they were doing this flyover in New York City like a few days ago, so it was on CNN several days ago, and they interviewed people that were like, I just think that was lovely. That was just a lovely thank you for our medical personnel. Like, there's people that think this was a good thing that happened.
Well, yeah, same way that they think that, flying jets over a baseball game is somehow logical and or connected to...
It's connected to peace.
Right.
Peace.
But that's the other thing is that, we were walking outside and we turned at this corner to a bridge that is, even when things are quote unquote open in DC, is never really heavily populated. People just kind of like walk back and forth on it. But there were like people relatively tightly packed on this bridge looking up at the sky. And it's like, first of all, it reminded me of that scene in Independence Day where everyone rushes up to the top of the building to say, take me with you. And then the aliens just bomb them.
Right. So
but
they're all out there watching it like, we love you. And then they're like,
right. But it also made me think, yeah, I'm sure all the medical professionals are super stoked that more people are probably going to get sick because their dumbasses were huddled together looking up at the sky at your stupid fucking display.
And you know who doesn't have time to stand outside and watch jets fly over?
Right.
All the medical personnel.
Yeah. So it really wasn't anything to... And I'm including this in an article that I'm working on right now. The conservative estimate on how much that cost... let's just say that it was only 22 cities, and let's say that there's the conservative estimate on the cost of fuel and the flight time and everything was $1.32 million.
Which I'm sure it was more than that, because we don't really know how to calculate how many personnel are involved in making sure that shit happens.
And their argument, I read this in a couple of articles, their argument is that, well, that's already folded into the Pentagon budget. But why? Why is that already folded into the Pentagon budget? Why would a fucking pointless, stupid, masturbatory flyover for no fucking reason, why would that be folded into a budget?
Because the truth is they have trillions of dollars unaccounted for, so they don't even know how to spend it all. I mean, they're coming up with new displays just to find reasons to spend money. But you're right. It is totally pathetic and disgusting and infuriating because it does nothing. And meanwhile, you have workers across the country that can't pay bills, that can't get by. But don't worry, our military has the money to dick around in the sky and just...
Right, and you couldn't possibly take any of that money and, I don't know, divert it to buy some ventilators. Or, hey, how about appropriate PPE for those medical professionals that you are just so gushy over? I mean, fuck you.
I wanted to do this before, but I forgot. I wanted to let you guys know what we're covering in this episode because we got a lot of juicy stuff coming up. We're going to talk for a moment about Joe Biden has finally responded to the accusations, a little about Julian Assange. But more importantly, we are going to continue maybe not more importantly, but also, we are going to continue our discussion of Planet of the Humans, which has had this crazy pushback. I mean, people are flipping out over this film, and I now have a better understanding of the arguments against it. I've read a lot about the people tearing it down. I've also watched far too much of the filmmakers responding to these points.
Yeah, this has been like your thing the past week or so.
Well, I'll get into why I think it's actually very important. So we're gonna get into that, and also, either this week or if we don't have time next week, some interesting stuff on the Innocence Project and the forensic science, as they call it. But all right, so let's go back and with the coronavirus continuing across the country, some places opening up, some places continuing to die in record numbers, unfortunately. But workers are fighting back in a large way, and this is perhaps one of the few places I see some hope here is workers are realizing their power, I think, in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. And like the workers movement, these type of things are often gutted and then have a resurgence. And I think that this moment could be really important in workers across the country realizing the power they have and realizing that they should be paid more, they should be treated better. And anyway, there's strikes going on around the country, and of course your mainstream media is either barely covering it or not covering it at all. However, to me it's hilarious that they will cover endlessly, though, and I mentioned this on Redacted tonight. They'll cover the protests, the idiots running around with machine guns saying we need to open the state. That to them is very important to keep covering nonstop, which just makes it obviously bigger, makes those protests bigger, because it doesn't matter whether they criticize them. It's just going to make them bigger when you see it turn on CNN and you see a bunch of guys with guns running around saying, open up the state. People
and of course, there's the stark juxtaposition between people, for instance, peacefully protesting a pipeline that only exists as a colonial method to continue extracting all of the resources we possibly can from this finite planet that we're fucking over. Those people get tear gas, they get dogs sicked on them. They get beaten, shot with rubber bullets, but these fucking ass jockeys walk into a government building armed to the fucking teeth and get in the faces of police, and they're just like, well, that's their First Amendment right.
They have a right to do that because they're white.
I also want to I want to flag that Payday Report has a great map of ongoing strikes around the country. You can find that by going to paydayreport.com. It's their COVID-19 strike wave interactive map. And they also have information like, for instance, they've got the strikes listed, but they also have little like yellow warning signs about certain places that are reopening early. For instance, there's a pork plant that's reopening. This one for Smithfield, it's reopening 14 days before quarantine is due to be over, thanks to Trump's Defense Production Act order. So there's also information on that, and obviously the importance of highlighting these struggles and making sure that we stand with these workers. Also, of course, in the instance of the pork plant, it's also a disgusting display of big ag and how horrendous our animal agriculture practices are, and how these are really like hotspots for disease just because of the way that things are structured in terms of the massive slaughtering and the really despicable conditions that these animals, I wouldn't even call it live in, are unfortunate enough to exist in.
Right, and many people were saying that they thought the next, antibiotic resistant bug that was going to wipe out a lot of people was going to come from these big ag plants and disgusting situations where these animals are pumped full of hormones and antibiotics in order to just live in the horror show that they're in. But so yeah, check that out. PaydayReport.com is a good place to go for that. Also, a guy I know, a comedian I know named Rob, he was doing a series. I'm going to try and get him on Redacted tonight for a few minutes if we have time to get the studio space. But anyway, he was doing a series he's an Amazon picker. He basically goes into Whole Foods, buys people's groceries for them, and delivers them to them.
Which I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't advertise it. Never mind. He doesn't do that. So he's been working for Amazon for 2 years because, just need a fucking job. And he was filming on his phone a little like comedy series. It wasn't even that. It's not even that. Like, there's a couple of mentions about how they're not getting paid enough, and about how Bezos like sent down workers from somewhere else to fill the hours, so that the hours that the actual workers were filling was not enough for like overtime and double pay or whatever. So basically, they were hurting their wages and things like that, cutting their hours. And there's some mention of that, but generally what this YouTube series is him running around and goofing off about how crazy it is that there's no toilet paper in the aisles and shit like that. It's really not that big a deal. But either way, he's now been fired. He's now been fired, probably for the few statements he had in those films about the wages and about the workers getting screwed by Bezos. So anyway, it just goes to show you cannot speak out even slightly against this company, and that's why they make sure there's no union, because if you had a union, then doing something like that, some small issue like that, never would have gotten someone fired if there was a union. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be talking more about, so will Eleanor, but I'm going to be talking more about the strikes and everything on Redacted tonight. But I want to move on to a quick discussion of Joe Biden's response to Tara Reade's accusations that he sexually assaulted her back in the 90s. And there is corroborating evidence, such as her mom called Larry King live on air back in the early 90s. And, you can go watch the clip of her saying, hey, my daughter was assaulted, and how does she address a congressperson without, repercussions and getting fired and things like that. And, they don't give names, but apparently that is her mother's voice. There's also other people who have said, yeah, she told me about it back in the early 90s. So there is enough evidence that something happened. And Joe Biden finally addressed it. At first, he just wouldn't say anything. I think because they couldn't find him because he was wandering around in a Kmart somewhere, thinking he was the Goblin King. But Joe Biden sat down on MSNBC and gave a largely mushy-mouthed interview trying to say it never happened. There is, if you cut it kind of out of context, there's one moment where he says, unequivocally, it did not happen. So he did say that. But in general, with all the other questions, you're kind of like, what the fuck are you talking about? And, I mean, I guess here's the question. Is there all these left-wing, so-called, all these liberals running around saying, no, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count, it's nothing, whereas all of Trump's matter and Kavanaugh's matter and everything. Is this just massively hypocritical?
Well, yeah, and I talked about some of this on By Any Means Necessary, which is another good podcast if you're looking for some more podcasts. Excuse me. And basically, the idea that sexual assault only matters based on the survivor's political leanings, or I'm sorry, the assaulter's political leanings, is fucking disgusting. Rape is rape, assault is assault. It doesn't fucking matter who does it. It is what it is. And Biden is a pervert and a sexual assault perpetrator, and that's just the facts. And fine, it's uncomfortable if you like the guy, but the bigger question is, why do you like him anyway? Because even if you take away the sexual assault, he's a fucking asshole and an idiot. So this is, but we see this kind of, we saw this in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. This whole, I have a vagina, therefore I am automatically feminist. No. Feminism is not Hillary Clinton. Feminism is not Marilyn Hewson, who's the CEO of Lockheed Martin, who famously did a call after Obama's deal with Iran that said to stockholders that said, don't worry, there will be plenty of unrest in the region. We're going to make sure of it. Everyone calm down. That's not feminism, okay?
Right.
Having a vagina does not make you a feminist any more than being black makes you a Black Panther. It's fucking stupid. That's not no. So
Hold
I
on,
feel
are you
like
telling me Oprah's not a feminist Black Panther?
right. Shocking, I know. But yeah, so this is, and of course, we've seen this sort of attempt to conflate feminism with being a woman. Biden brought Hillary Clinton out there to talk about how much she respects Joe. His campaign has uplifted the comments by Stacey Abrams, who fucking said that I believe that Biden did not do this.
And Stacey Abrams is high on the list of possible vice presidential candidate with Joe Biden. So.
Right. It's a political play, and as is so often the case, they're using survivors of sexual assault as pawns. And I think it's very transparent what's happening here, and this is also a great indication of why so often survivors don't come forward, because they're never believed. Even if they are believed, their lives are absolutely destroyed. Think of what was her name? Blasey Ford, right, who accused Kavanaugh of sexual assault. Their lives are ruined, and that's unfortunately the reality of the situation. But this is such blatant anti-feminism. It's the idea that the lived experiences of a sexual assault survivor don't matter unless they can be used for political gain. So the same people that were talking about how we have to believe Blasey Ford and how we have to get rid of Kavanaugh are some of the same people now that are trying to silence the accusations against Joe Biden. And does not make you a feminist. It makes you an anti-feminist.
And I think, as you've said before, this doesn't mean there can't be untrue accusations from a woman. That does exist that can exist in our society. But when you have a guy who has, the number of accusations against Joe Biden of either inappropriate touching or inappropriate comments, if you were to really get involved in collecting them, I'm sure you'd get, upwards of 50 or 100 or something. So, and same with Donald Trump. So when you look at the entirety of their canon of sexual predatory behavior, it's a large amount. Well, and so that's something else that I think you need to look at.
Well, right. There's a pattern of behavior here for sure. But even if there weren't, I think that it's important that every accusation is looked into. And I think that if it then were to come out, for instance, if someone were accused of sexual assault or something, and then someone looks into it and finds that that's not true. Okay, well, then that's not true. But that has nothing to do with the survivors who do come forward and it's found to be true. The issue with Biden is that nobody's looking into it. No one's investigating. Everyone's just trying to cover it up. And this really, again, this speaks to a common experience that, and I say women because it's predominantly women that come forward as survivors, that these survivors go through. The fact that they're not believed, the fact that they had it coming, the fact that they're exaggerating or they don't remember because they were drinking or whatever the fuck. This is why so many survivors choose not to come forward, because this is how the system treats them, particularly when it's a powerful white man. And that's unfortunately the reality of the situation. So yes, I absolutely agree that, each case should be investigated by itself. We shouldn't just always say that, that anytime someone is accused of sexual assault, it's true. But like you mentioned, Lee, there's a pattern of behavior here. And there's also plenty of evidence to suggest that this did happen. So I think that the evidence is against Joe Biden, and the fact that everyone is trying to cover for him, including the likes of Hillary Clinton, Klobuchar, and Stacey Abrams, just really speaks to the morals and the foundation of the Democratic Party not being for the marginalized, not being for the oppressed. They don't give a flying fuck about Me Too. I mean, Nancy Pelosi was asked about these accusations and basically said, I think we really have to focus on the importance of this election. Oh, well, there we have it, folks. Nancy Pelosi isn't going to go up there and be like, no, fuck her. I don't think that happened. But she's going to massage it in a way that really makes you feel like an asshole.
She's going to inappropriately massage it.
Right. You're going to make you feel like an asshole if you think that the fact that Biden is a sexual predator is somehow more important than winning this election for the blue team.
Well, right. And the way they talk about, they're like, well, look at what Trump did. And it's like, no, Trump is a fucking sexual predator too. And that doesn't make it okay to support Biden. It doesn't make it, or jump up and down and act like Biden's a great guy because Trump is a worse sexual predator. Yeah. Like, that's, how did we end up in a situation where they're asking Americans to choose between two fucking sexual predators? Let's ask yourself that. Not to mention that in an actual legitimate democracy or republic, we literally right now still have other options. There are ways to A, put in a different Democratic candidate at the convention, and B, there are other parties. Like there's the Green Party, there's the Libertarian Party, where Justin Amash has just said he's running for president on that ticket. So the idea that you've got, listen, choose the lesser of two sexual assaulters, that's to me insane. So anyway, I know everybody's heard this debated a million times, so we can move on to another egregious persecution, harm to a human being that Joe Biden wholeheartedly supports, of course, as does Donald Trump, and that is the persecution of Julian Assange. Now, what I have that's a little bit new than everything you already know about how he's in Belmarsh prison, basically being tortured in there, kept in solitary confinement and shit like that. He's very ill. Coronavirus is running crazy in the prisons, and they very much think that he is a super high risk for that. But beyond that is that, and I can't remember if I mentioned this on the podcast, I might have before, but a few weeks ago, his partner, Stella Morris, came forward and for the first time ever said that she and Julian are together and that she has given birth to two of his children while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. So she has two kids by him. I can't remember the ages. But anyway, I talked to her a little bit on Twitter and on Twitter direct message, and she is continuing to write things. Now that she's a public figure, she didn't want to be a public figure. But now that she's, already out there, she basically felt the need to come out because the prosecution was going to out her anyway and reveal this reality. So she has been writing op-eds, and you can check those out and check out her Twitter, Stella Morris on Twitter, to follow her stories. And, as you can imagine, it just heightens yet another reason why Julian Assange, a publisher, should not be persecuted or indicted or imprisoned or tortured for releasing absolutely true information about our empire. It really is disgusting what's being done to him, and not that it's like okay to torture people who haven't just had two children. but it does make it even more disgusting. I don't know. It just amplifies the fact that these two kids have never actually hugged their father, I assume, is pretty
I think
fucking
they
crazy.
had when
In
he was in the
Ecuador?
Ecuadorian embassy,
Well,
but they've never
can't
like
now.
gone to the fucking park with their dad.
Yeah.
But I also want to highlight this this uncomfortable point here because it's something that folks have talked about in the past. Speaking of using sexual assault as a pawn, this was something that was certainly done with Julian Assange.
Yeah.
You know, when Julian's lawyers told Swedish prosecutors that they could absolutely question him, just he's in the Ecuadorian embassy, he's not going anywhere. There was so much wishy-washy bullshit, and there's been several reports by the two women in Sweden that they were kind of coaxed into coming forward and saying these things, also conflating not using a condom with a violent rape. I'm not trying to say that that sort of consensual agreements based on protection aren't important, but it's not the same as a violent rape. And I think that the what was done here is using sexual assault and rape as a way as a smear campaign against Assange. Well, and here again, like, I'm not saying that Assange is a nice person. I've never met the guy. I don't know. That's not the fucking point. You don't bring in sexual assault as a smear campaign because, again, that delegitimizes the whole issue of sexual assault. It makes people not want to believe survivors because they're like, look, you're fabricating this whole sexual assault story, being wishy-washy about the whole thing, and then ultimately dropping the charges, which makes people think, oh, see, you can never fucking trust women.
Well, and on multiple levels, there was people were forced to keep that investigation going. So you had the women who apparently have ultimately said they didn't even want to do this, and they were pressured into acting like that something, they were assaulted. And then you have the investigation in Sweden where the Swedes wanted to drop it within the first year. They were pressured. Ultimately, those emails were leaked out. They were pressured to keep the investigation going just so it would look bad for Julian Assange. So, and then they dropped it anyway, ultimately, after 4 years, I think. Then they were pressured into reopening it once he was brought into Belmarsh prison, which I think they did. Now I think it's dropped again because they keep being pressured by America and by Britain into acting like this is a thing. And you're right, it's using the idea of sexual assault or rape in order to malign people. And John Kiriaka made a great point about this on Loud and Clear, where he said he's seen this happen to multiple quote-unquote enemies of the state, whistleblowers and the like. It's happened to, Scott Ritter. It's happened to multiple people where they basically are like, well, it'll look bad if we're just prosecuting this whistleblower, so let's say he has kiddie porn on his computer or something. And this seems to be a common thread.
Yeah, and it's really fucking disgusting. And it speaks to the value that both parties place on survivors, predominantly women, and our lived experiences. And yeah, it's an absolute shit show. But I wanted to highlight that because it ties into the whole issue of believing survivors and how we treat sexual assault in general.
True. Let's get to Planet of the Humans here in a second. I just want to say that many of you have recently joined over at patreon.com/commoncensored. Thank you so much. Honestly, you keep this show going. We have no funding or advertising outside of that. Something very exciting is that Eleanor's new podcast is back, or her podcast is back. Back and better than ever.
Back and different.
So where can people find that?
Yeah, so for folks who knew of the podcast before, the Act Out podcast, it was basically the audio from the video show, the TV show, but now I wanted to bring it back and kind of change it up a bit. So the podcast is every other week, and it's a collection of some poetry, because I got several requests from people saying, I miss the spoken word, which, awesome, thank you. And some philosophy, like either the philosophy of capitalism or Why do pants exist? Things like that. And
The deep stuff.
The deep stuff. So if you're looking for some escapism that is both intellectual and at times odd.
I do not ever picture you being escapism.
Well, Lee, I want people to feel like they're
artful, passionate,
right.
all these wonderful things, creative,
right.
not escapist. You're not like Big Bang Theory, the sitcom.
Well, see, okay, well, I guess we have different definitions of escapism because to me, the book that I'm currently reading, The Ballad of the Anarchist Bandits, to me, that's escapism, even though it's a true story and it has to do with like the evil machinations of capitalism in turn of the century Paris. I fucking love it. So that to me is escapism. I've never even seen a fucking episode of Big Bang Theory, but I'm assuming it's awful. So if you like that kind of escapism, not the holy shit, I think my IQ just dropped 40 points escapism, then check out Act Out. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. It's also on actout.libsyn.com.
All right, so the show is called Act Out. Check it out, everybody. Something else that I don't know, some of you probably already caught it, but Eleanor and I have been doing a live stream. It's been basically every other week, but we're going to see how often we can do it. Could get to every week, but that is simulcast on youtube.com/redacted tonight, as well as facebook.com/LeeCampComedian. And it's got some similarities to the podcast, except the main difference is that we're mostly dealing with questions from you guys, from listeners and viewers, and there's a live chat going on next to it, so we highlight certain comments and respond to all of you. And so it's great because it's the only time we get to like talk live with you guys. So if you want to check out some of the ones that are already posted, that's at youtube.com/redacted tonight. And if you want to find out when these are about to go live so you can be involved in the chat, the best way is probably my email list, which is you can sign up by texting the word redacted to 33777. You can also sign up at leecamp.com. It's a free email list, and that will I email to let people know that we're doing the live stream that night. So that's how to find out about it. Let's see. If you need more content, my stand-up comedy special is free at leecampamerican.com. You can also get my book at leecampbook.com. Intro by Jimmy Dore, forward by Chris Hedges. Check it out. It's called Bullet Points and Punchlines. And all of Eleanor's work is at artkillingapathy.com. Okay, we've gone on too long with the housekeeping. But
housekeeping.
Want me jack you off?
Okay, for people who haven't watched Tommy Boy, that's going to sound super bizarre. But if you haven't watched Tommy Boy, the bigger question is why?
It's a joke.
And go watch that movie immediately.
It's a line from Tommy Boy. So okay. I don't even know how to set all this up because it's been this ongoing fucking fury over this film, which, when I just watched it, the fury hadn't started yet. So I kind of was just like, oh, this is an interesting documentary. It's not even that. It's not like a Michael Moore documentary. Michael Moore presented it. He's not present in the documentary at all. It's made by someone he's worked with for a long time named Jeff Gibbons, I believe. And he's not Michael Moore's not the narrator or anything. So as I said last week, if you hate Michael Moore, you don't worry about it. This is just take the documentary for what it is. But it is this kind of gut-wrenching destruction of the big green movement, largely the green tech movement, saying that, and I know I told you this stuff last week, so I'll get past this in a second, but for those just listening to this one, I want you to know what it is. And it destroys kind of what, like, where the way people view solar panels and wind turbines as if they're going to, and biomass is another one, as if they're going to save the planet tomorrow. We're on the cusp of tomorrow finding out that all our power comes from solar panels and we can just stop worrying about it. And it just kind of, I'd say the heart of it kind of destroys that. Now, what I'm gonna do differently than last week is I'm gonna get into a lot of the complaints about it, because this film it pissed people off so much that it for a minute, it was censored by one of the sites that was hosting it. They literally took it down, and then later, after I think a threat of lawsuit, put it back up. It has very powerful people saying it should be censored, it should be taken down, no one should be allowed to see it. I mean,
because freedom.
That's a red flag right there. Is nobody should be allowed to let this enter their brains. Now, one of the biggest complaints about it is that some of the facts are either wrong or misleading. One of the ones I've seen again and again. Well, hold on, I'll say that in 1 second, but I want to tell you who's coming after it. Bill McKibben, who is attacked a little in the film, not like a crazy amount, but a little bit, and 350.org. Bill McKibben has responded. Also, Sierra Club, of course, is furious, and they're coming after Michael Moore and everything. A lot of these big green people are coming after him and against the film. And another one of the big names that people keep referencing is Josh Fox is saying this film needs to be taken down and oh my God, how horrible. Now, Josh Fox, he made a good film called...
He needs to be put down.
He made a good film called Gasland, but since then he's largely gotten just kind of involved in Big Green, and
well, and also,
he wants to be an MSNBC commentator,
right? And he like in 2016, he went on mainstream media to talk about how we all have to rally behind Hillary and shit, and now he's talking about how we have to rally behind Biden. It's like, fuck you,
right? So he's basically a mainstream liberal who made one good film, and now he's viewed as the be all and end all of the Green movement or something. Anyway, he's he despises this film and everything, of course, because I guess he's been running around saying everything.
Because he's the only one that can make documentaries about climate stuff.
He doesn't like having competition. But anyway, the complaints about it are, one, that these people have done good work. One, that these people have done good work. So like Bill McKibben and 350.org have successfully gotten many organizations to divest from fossil fuels, which is a positive. No matter where the fuck solar panels stand, getting these massive entities to divest from fossil fuels is a positive. And I also support that. And, the film doesn't really talk about that. So I agree that it would be nice if there was some more, he did do this positive, but that's not really the focus of the film. The focus of the film is look how fucked up this thing we're told is going to save us really is. And look how much we've been misled by it. I mean, the film spans over 10 years. I think it starts in 2008 and goes to basically today. And it shows how much we're misled. It starts off in 2008 at a climate change rally or a solar rally, and finds out that it's being powered by diesel or whatever. And then in 2018 or 2017, they're at the big climate change rally, whatever the one is, fucking No Doubt is performing and shit. And they claim they're funded by they thank their sponsors, Citibank and Toyota, but the entire event is run by solar panels. And then they go backstage and find out, and they talk to the guy running the solar panels, and he goes, "No, we're not run by solar." He's like, "This whole thing's powered by diesel." He's like, "We have these 12 solar panels here, but this would run a hairdryer." So it's like the amount we're being misled is immense. And that's what this film gets out. And for those of you thinking of running and watching the film, just know you will walk away crying. At no point are they here's the hope.
Right.
At no point do they give you the positive. But another big complaint is, so they say the facts are old. People say, at one point in the film, they say solar panels are only 8% efficient. They only actually succeed in capturing 8% of the energy or something like that. And people go, "You morons, those are old stats. Those are old solar panels from 2008. Nowadays, solar panels capture 20%. And you're like, okay, that doesn't change the point of the film.
Right.
And I've watched Michael Moore address this stuff. Jeff Gibbons address this stuff. They have another scientist, Ozzy something, who's with them, who is tackling these issues. And they're like, yeah, in 2008, we made that part of the film in 2008. It's clear that's from the earlier time. We then bring it up to today. But yeah, that fact is old. But the fact that it's changed from 8% to 20% does not solve the overall fact, the deeper fact that in order to power the earth, the way we use energy, the way we use resources, if you wanted to try and power that with wind turbines and solar panels, etc., it would take thousands upon thousands of kilometers packed full of solar arrays that are made out of fucking coal and quartz and mining, and the amount you'd have to produce just to create these solar arrays to do that is insane. And so the point of the film is that we must address the amount of consumption on the planet. And they do say the number of humans, and as I said last week, yes, it's either the number of humans in consuming as we are, or we could have this number of humans and not live the way we do. Those are kind of your options. Right. But the planet is collapsing, and this is the only film, this film and the conversations I've seen with it. Last night I watched a live stream where they talked to one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion, and this is the only place I see people having the conversation that the way we're living, we will be beyond the cusp of extinction, meaning extinction will be baked in, extinction will be guaranteed within 10 years. Yeah. 10 years. And it's the only place I see on a large platform, obviously you and I have been talking about it, but on a larger platform, it's the only place I've seen that conversation being had. Mm-hmm. And Big Green does not want to have that conversation. All these organizations do not want to have that conversation. They want to say, look, unfettered capitalism is fine. What you're consuming is fine. Just shift it over to adding in solar panels and all will be good.
Well, yeah, and I think, this is something that grassroots activists have talked about for quite some time, how capitalism and, big green energy, capitalism and climate justice cannot coexist. This capitalist big green energy concept is a farce. It's greenwashing at its best. But as you noted, Lee, it's really important to get this conversation out there on a wider scale. And it's not about telling people, oh, all hope is lost. It's about saying, look, we have to be realistic about this. It's like I oftentimes say that, it's like if you go into the doctor and he's like, you have cancer. And instead of saying, okay, well, what are my options? Let's do this. Let's fight this. You're like, I don't fucking hear you. I don't care. No, I don't. I'm going to go smoke and drink and fuck it. I don't care. It's like, well, you still have cancer. Like, just because you don't think it's a big problem doesn't mean it doesn't still happen and exist. So, and we have to be realistic with, what works. So it's not going to help you to slather yourself in coconut oil, for instance, to fight cancer. Big green is not the answer to fighting climate change. It's not the answer that we need to really engage in climate justice. The film talks about some of this, but there have been several reports of how Big Green is really just an extension of this sort of imperialist capitalist violence. For instance, you have indigenous communities in places in South America and the global South being forcibly removed from their land so they can clear cut a forest and put in fucking solar panels. Well, that's not green. That's not sustainable, you jackass. You're cutting down a forest and at the same time removing the stewards of that land who actually know how to live on it sustainably. It's fucking absurd. And so what we really need to talk about is smaller scale and sustainable energy. And this really speaks to the problems of this centralized capitalist structure, and so these are conversations that have to be had, and it's not about saying that, oh, all of the renewables we've ever thought of are shit. It's about how can we make these better and actually make them sustainable. This is something that I've mentioned on this podcast before. The fact that they're dredging the deep sea floor in order to find minerals for batteries. Well, that doesn't make batteries fucking sustainable. It makes it horrific. Right. You're dredging a part of the planet that took literally millions of years to form, and you're destroying it in a matter of like 5 minutes.
And a good example to go to what you're speaking about that's talked about in the film to shrink it down to just a one home, version of dredging the sea is this Aussie guy. I need to learn his last name, but he used to be involved in putting in solar panels for people and doing the calculations as to how much money they'd save and how good it would be for their heating and cooling and etc. And he went to I don't know, maybe it was someone he knew, maybe it was his parents' house or something. But he said there's these big great trees in front of the house that they had leaves in the summer, and so they shaded the house in the summer, and then the leaves were gone in the winter, so the sun came through in the winter. And he did the calculation, and they were planning on knocking down these trees so that you could get the sun on the roof for the solar panels. And he did the calculations of, well, how much are you going to save on energy, et cetera, and found that just leaving those two big trees there would actually save them, was saving them more money on heating and cooling than cutting them down and putting in these solar panels. Not to mention, cutting down trees and putting in solar, you're cutting down something that is 100 years old and will last another 100 years or whatever, and putting in something that will last 10 years.
And also, trees are a carbon store. So,
Yeah.
and that's why, the importance of it's not just about planting more trees. You got to stop cutting down trees, because guess what? A fucking tree sapling, though very cute, does not store carbon the way a 200-year-old fucking oak tree does. And that's just science. It's math. So we have to stop cutting down trees, not just replanting trees.
And so, the film has some flaws that people have highlighted again and again, are really harping on. For example, they talk about Bill McKibben had supported biomass, and they even show him, alongside, I don't remember which, like, banking exec or whoever the fuck was funding some of these things to really promote biomass. And biomass is, I talked about it on the last podcast, just basically chopping down trees and burning those. But you could chop down all the trees in the United States and it would only power us for a year. It's like a completely nonsensical thing to do. And Bill McKibben apparently has turned against biomass a few years ago and actually written things about it, about how bad it is. And so he's had a change of mind. And I understand that. Like, people can change their views. People can evolve. They can learn things. But getting, saying the film should not exist because they showed Bill McKibben, in his own words, speaking about something 5 years ago rather than the current Bill McKibben who no longer supports biomass, I don't think that's a reason to discount the entire point of the film, which is that these things, these systems that we've been told were going to save us. Oh, we're going to have electric cars, and we're going to have solar panels, and we're going to have wind turbines, and then all will be well in our system. It's completely and utterly false. We are wasting time. It is horseshit. And even if some of this sustainable energy is happening, so let's say we get a certain percentage of our energy from solar panels, under unfettered capitalism and under the ravenous consumerism of the world system that we're now running, if you add energy with solar panels, we don't then decrease and take away the energy need by decreasing gasoline. We just gobble up that energy and keep growing, quote unquote. So we're just using more and more energy. We're just growing, and yeah, we might get some of it from solar panels, some of them from wind turbines. We're just using more and more and more. It just increases. And so, I mean, the environmental systems around us are collapsing, and to sit here and talk about powering our world with things that are incredibly destructive and disgusting is not the answer. The answer has to be much larger than that. And that discussion is not being had. It's not allowed to be had. And that's why this film is being censored, or they're trying to censor it. By the way, it's free on YouTube. They just put it up on YouTube. Just Google Planet of the Humans and you'll find it. And Extinction Rebellion, on the one of the co-founders, Claire something, was talking about how part of the goal of Extinction Rebellion was to shift the Overton window, shift what people view as acceptable behavior to fight against climate change. And I think that for the uninitiated, I know that you have been, very involved in pipeline fights, and you've seen people getting arrested for this type of thing for years now. And let's not act like Extinction Rebellion invented activism. I get that. But for the uninitiated who have not, are not involved in this, have not seen any of this stuff, are not involved in pipeline fights, it's like seeing large groups of people in London glue themselves to buildings and shit like that has changed the way a lot of people view what is acceptable behavior to fight against not just climate change. And that's another thing I keep highlighting. It's not just climate change. It's environmental collapse. The systems are collapsing. We have very few animals left. Our insect population are collapsing. And but point to the places that discussion is being had. They're very few.
Right. And I mean, yes, there are, and I want to highlight this because I think it's important to make I
like those moments. I live for those moments. So,
well, I'm glad that you're enjoying yourself. Hold on, my tongue got stuck at the back of my fucking brain.
It was the pollen.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's important to highlight this because there's a difference between infighting and constructive criticism. So there's constructive criticism that I have for Extinction Rebellion, that a lot of folks that I know have for Extinction Rebellion, but I'm not interested in turning that into infighting. Just like there's constructive criticism against renewables or to renewables.
And against Michael Moore.
Right. But there's a difference between turning that into infighting. Infighting is like, it's like baseball for the left. It's like our historic pastime. And of course, I'm not trying to make it sound like the government hasn't had a large hand in perpetuating infighting. Of course, COINTELPRO is probably the most famous example. But COINTELPRO,
infighting, all of it.
Right,
yeah.
COINTELPRO never ended. It just has a different name now.
Now it's called just the CIA. They don't need a program.
Just the FBI.
Just the FBI. They don't need a program name anymore. They're just like, that's what we do.
Yeah, we are that bureau. But I think that, it's important that we recognize that that these conversations have to be had, and they are fucking uncomfortable. Like we have grown up. If you live in the States or really, Western Europe as well, we've grown up thinking that we just can go to the store and buy new stuff. Like we can just go to IKEA whenever we need another fucking set of drawers. And this level of consumption cannot keep going, regardless of whether you run that shit on oil, coal, or fucking hamsters on wheels. It cannot perpetuate at this rate because the earth literally doesn't have enough to produce, to give to that level of consumption for 7 billion people. It's just it doesn't have it. So that is that uncomfortable conversation that has to be had that isn't being had. It really, in larger spaces. And I think that however people get to that conversation, be it Extinction Rebellion, be it this film, be it, I don't know, however you get there, it's important to have that conversation. And I'm also reminded of another thing that a lot of organizers have mentioned with regards to outreach: meet people where they're at. And so coming down hard on people for being this way or that way or being not woke enough or whatever, that's fucking counterproductive. We need more people to not only have this conversation, but engage in it actively, to live that philosophy of consuming less. And that means that you got to meet people where they're at. You got to be willing to sit with people and say, look, I get that, that this is how you live your life, and now let's talk about that, and let's talk about like how we can make changes as a community. There has to be this welcoming aspect to engaging with people on this subject of big green and too much consumption. And I think that that's where it's important to demarcate between constructive criticism and infighting. Let's not devolve into infighting here. Let's meet people where they're at. Let's give constructive criticism where it's needed, and be willing to accept it if it's directed towards us. And let's actually create these systems that we need in order to fucking survive.
And yeah, and also I want to say, like, there are plenty of criticisms to be had about Michael Moore himself. I haven't followed every detail about his career. I've seen probably half his films or something. Some of them I liked, but I think there's an ongoing question for kind of leftists, for more radical people who want more radical change, as to whether he is kind of the MSNBC bullshit liberal, or whether he is something more extreme. And I think at times he has often shown himself as something more extreme, and then other times he kind of backs off, and you're like, why are you kowtowing to CNN or Fox News or whatever? And I was wondering that question as I watched this live stream last night, where he's talking about how our systems are collapsing. He's got Extinction Rebellion on there. They're talking about big green and green tech, and how it is not saving us, not in time. And meanwhile, he's wearing a hat that says BBC News. And I don't know if he thought it was funny to wear it as ironic,
I don't think so.
I'm highly suspicious that he just likes BBC. Now, BBC is a, pro-imperial war propaganda network. It may not be as bad as Fox News or CNN, but they have, in the past several years, they have done nothing to support Julian Assange. They support the privatization of their healthcare system, largely in the UK. They've done all the maligning and trash talk about Corbyn that's been utter horseshit, to just make sure that basically the Bernie Sanders of the UK is not allowed to have any power. So they are a large corporate entity that has done everything to fight against this. And maybe he was being sarcastic. I don't know. But I do want to read a comment, although maybe we've kind of already addressed it, by Will Johnson, a listener who is responding to my... Thanks, Will, for responding. He's responding to me addressing this film last week. And he writes... the documentary Planet of the Humans could easily have been produced by Exxon Oil. It's filled with errors about clean energy and climate activism. And then he quotes a professor at UC California who says Michael Moore produced a film about climate change that's a gift to big oil. Now, here's the thing. When you say gift to big oil, to me, that is basically like, don't dare ask these questions because it might give fodder to the other side. But if we're going to kill ourselves by not asking these questions, I mean, we could literally sit here producing solar panels with horrible extraction mining, producing electric cars with horrible lithium mining and lithium batteries. Meanwhile, the electricity that are powering those electric cars is coming from burning coal. You could have all of that shit going on, and the whole time saying, don't ask the question. Just nobody ask. Nobody say a word about where the energy's really coming from, or how the mining is done. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, then we all die anyway. So what would be the point of not asking those questions? Now, in terms of the, filled with errors, it sounds like that most of the errors I've seen addressed have been because they started the film in 2008 and various forms of production have changed and grown. People have changed their views. Bill McKibben doesn't support biomass anymore. Solar panels are slightly more effective now, but none of it really undermines the point of the film.
Right, and you could say, maybe in the film it should have pointed out, by the way, oil, coal, and gas are fucking bad.
Yeah.
That could be like an editorial comment.
They use that as an assumed, which maybe they shouldn't have.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. Also in activist circles, like how much 101 do you want to do if we're talking about deeper issues? Like how much review of those basic points? You don't start a climate justice speech by saying climate change is real. You just assume that everyone's on the same page. But that could be a legitimate argument. But it's also important to note that we can and should hold two thoughts in our head at the same time. So you can think that oil and gas are bad, but that also industrial scale, quote unquote, renewables are also bad. We can hate Joe Biden and hate Donald Trump at the same time.
Right.
Like, let's really work on removing ourselves from this programmed binary system that they've created for us.
We're going to wrap up here in a minute, because we have done a long episode this time around. But thank you, Will Johnson, for responding. And as point of fact about that, we do read your comments as best we can. You can comment under the post at leecamp.com, but the easiest way to reach us is to email commoncensored@protonmail.com. We're going to keep addressing this. I mean, I'm going to keep following up with what's going on with this film. If you are strong at heart and able to handle these topics, I recommend you watch it. If you are already in a place where you're cutting yourself because there aren't as many birds out your window as there used to be 10 years ago, then I would not recommend this film. That's a bad thing at this moment for you, because I do believe that we need you in the fight, and I don't want you going catatonic. So please keep fighting with us, or join us in the fight. These things are hard to handle. I don't deny it, and it's just not an easy and fun thing. But I think that I've always felt that keeping our head in the sand as the sand gets very hot is a bad idea. And, The Guardian just came out with a new study, or just reported on a new study, showing that 1 billion people in 50 years will be living in places that are too hot for humans, meaning literally unlivable, not Texas hot, like you are going to die hot. And that's 1 billion people. So where do they go? Well, they overwhelm the systems of where the other people are living. And that's the route we're on right now. So, denying this stuff, saying, oh no, we need to support the Citibank-backed green energy proposal, then we're fucked if that's our option. And anyway, I'm going to keep following this. I do want to get to Innocence Project and forensic science and all that crap next week, because it is an immense topic. So many people are in prison because of this horseshit science. And anyway, we're gonna break that down more next week. There won't be special content or extra content this week because we are in a rush for other interviews and things. But we gave you a long episode, so hopefully that'll do. Also, as I said, we've been live streaming, and we'd love for you to join us there at youtube.com/redacted tonight. But more importantly, many of you have joined at patreon.com/commoncensored in the past few weeks, and really, we can't do it without you. This show and so much extra content. I mean, we've got so many projects going on. Eleanor now is volunteering, I think, 130% of her time at mutual aid. And so patreon.com/commoncensored is the way to support the show, and you can become a member for $1 or $2 an episode. Eleanor's podcast is called Act Out. I highly recommend you check it out. It's back. It's better than ever. If you enjoy hearing Eleanor, as I do, check out Act Out. And you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. My stand-up comedy special you can watch online for free now at leecampamerican.com. Eleanor's film comes out in May. It's called hardroadofhope.com. That's where you can find that. Also, my book is out at leecampbook.com. And artkillingapathy.com. You can find all of Eleanor's stuff.
And really quick before we sign off, I just want to end on a high note, because some of the a lot of what we talked about was super fucking depressing. Wild goats, adorable long-haired wild goats, have taken over a seaside town in Wales, and it's fucking adorable.
With huge horns, massive horns.
They look like they just wandered out of Middle Earth and into this Welsh town, and they're just taking over the streets, and it's fucking adorable.
Do they have adorable accents too? Because they're Welsh.
Yes, of course they do. So just Google, DuckDuckGo Welsh goats. And just look at that.
You just took everyone that was going to go and become a member, and now they're off to welshgoats.com.
Well, no. Now they have an even better reason to become a member, because I told them about Welsh goats.
They were going to go listen to your podcast. They had it all typed up, Act Out, and then they were like, well, hold on.
You can open a new tab. Jesus.
People do not multitask like that.
You can, but it's not
Welsh
multitasking.
Goats trumps all.
Just open a new tab. Come on.
All right. Thank you, guys. Keep fighting.
Act out.